The trenches were a staple of life for millions of men from around the globe. Built as a system of 3 interconnected layers, the trenches stretched over 400 miles from Belgium to Switzerland. They were designed in a zigzag pattern to add stability during artillery bombardment and defense. Should a section of trench fall to the enemy, they couldn't simply set up a machine gun to mow down a line of exposed soldiers. One estimate claims that if all the trenches from the Western Front were connected end to end, it would total 25,000 miles, more than enough to circle the globe at the equator. Soldiers would serve in the trenches 3 out of every 4 weeks. The first week would be spent in the front line trenches located between 50 yards to a mile from the enemy lines. Bordered by thickets of barbed wire, the soldiers in these trenches were the first line of defense and the spearheads of attack. In front of these trenches were listening outposts that were meant to watch for enemy action at night. These were extremely dangerous and exposed areas. Many times, the men sent to guard them would wind up at the wrong end of an enemy bayonet, either being taken prisoner or killed to prevent the alert of an enemy attack from going out. Several hundred yards back from the front was the support trench, the home for troops in the second week of their month-long rotation. If enemy forces should push into the trench line, this layer provided additional troops for a counterattack or to support an offensive advance. Several hundred yards back from these were the reserve trenches, the last line a soldier had to endure before being given a 1-week respite. On frostbitten nights, soldiers would awake to find themselves curled up next to the enormous rats that infested the battlefields. After bitterly cold nights, it was possible to wake up to discover you were missing a finger or your nose, victims of the constantly gnawing rats. Lice were another concern, but paled in comparison to the agony and deformities caused by trench foot. Hours spent with their feet submerged in the fetid water of the bottom of the trenches took a high toll on the soldiers. Life in the trenches was one of monotony, punctuated by moments of extreme terror. The constant shelling and threat of enemy attack took a toll on men. A new ailment, dubbed shell shock, began to manifest in the ranks. This mania or depression was believed to be the result of concussive force of artillery bombardment on the brain. Today, we know it as post-traumatic stress disorder. Treatments for this malady varied. In one section of the British lines, soldiers showing symptoms of PTSD were tied to the barbed wire outside the front line trenches and left exposed to the enemy. It was believed that about a minute of this treatment would shock the soldier back into a normal state of mind. This is just one example of the casual barbarity that the armed forces showed their own ranks. Every day before the sun came up, and just as the sun was dipping over the horizon in the evening, soldiers would stand for the morning and the evening hate. Believing this to be the most vulnerable time for an attack, both sides of no man's land would unleash a blistering barrage of artillery fire to discourage their enemies from making an advance. And so life endured in the trenches. Sections of the line were given familiar names like Piccadilly Circus or Trafalgar Square. Newspapers were written and distributed to the troops filled with poetry and satire. Trench art became an outlet for many. Taking spent artillery shells, soldiers would create beautiful etchings and embossings. And the war continued. Men would live in these conditions until November 11, 1918, when the armistice was finally signed between the Allied and the Central Powers.